Thank you, Zoom. Awesome. All right, I got a couple more slides for you all. So I know, and I feel it in my heart and soul, we have a lot of questions that folks have. So we're gonna try out a new platform today called Slido. It's a platform that we're gonna collect all the Q&A questions. So in the slide, as you see, you have an opportunity to enter your questions via two ways. Either your smartphone via the QR code, or you could hop on the web browser and type in slido.com and enter the number. Today's event will be moderated. So, Heather and LT will, converse, and LT has come together to, talk about the top 5 questions, as you know, the title of the session, but you also want to know what your questions are as well. At the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A, and we'll do our best to, get through as many questions as we can. Okay. If you have any questions about Slido, it's kind of getting finicky on your end, please drop a note in the chat so that Mike and I could tackle that. Okay. And lastly we'll get started. So I'm so excited to introduce 2 amazing people. I just met Heather literally 20 minutes ago, and she warms my heart. So I'm excited to introduce our moderator, Dr. Heather Adams from the Aspen Institute, who's going to drop some knowledge with her great facilitating skills. And of course, our MVP, LT. We all love her. And if you haven't had a chance to get to know her, I really hope that this conversation, you really get to see like her light and her knowledge, and just, she's an amazing person. I just want to thank her also for bringing all of us on board and bringing us in community together to talk about, some stuff that's just not as hard to talk about. And so I'm just so grateful. And with that, I'm going to end my slides and pass it on to Heather.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Mel. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to see all these gorgeous faces, familiar faces, new friends, I hope. Thank you for putting your information in the chat for us. Everybody's sharing their LinkedIn and their name and maybe their title or their organization or institution. But I will start by just introducing myself a little bit and LT. And I put a bunch of links in the chat just now, so you can be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and some of the other things that we're doing. But my name is Heather Adams. I am a senior program manager at the Aspen Institute, where I oversee all of our transfer engagement projects. So I put a few chats in a few links in the chat. If you're interested in transfer, please hit me up. I love all things transfer. I was a transfer student, and I was lucky enough to transfer to UCLA and get to meet LT, who is our incredible guest of honor. And I get the honor of introducing her. LT, or Latanya Reese-Miles, many of us know her as LT. Maybe you'll start calling her LT after this too, if you aren't already. And she is currently the director of scale and support at Career Launch. We're going to hear all about that in a little bit, so I won't belabor it, but basically, she establishes partnerships with 2-year and 4-year institutions to help address equity in the hidden job market for undergraduates. She was previously the Dean of Student Affairs at Menlo College, and also Executive Director for First-Year Experience at UCLA, which is where I got the wonderful experience of working with her. She's an author and a professor and a creator and a champion and a superhero, truly, really a superhero. I mean, those people that you know, or you've talked about, you've heard people talk about having mentors who see something in them that they might not have even seen in themselves, or maybe they champion qualities in you and bring forward qualities and skills that you weren't sure you even possessed or had. Well, not only LT does she have the superhero of advocating for all things first-gen college student, but she has that ability, that super amazing superpower to see and nurture and cultivate and develop and unearth this talent in people, pretty much everyone that she comes in contact with. So this woman is a mentor and a true leader, and somebody I'm inspired by every single day. And I feel lucky to know her. So I hope you all feel really lucky to get to learn from her today. We are definitely, as Mel said, going to go over a bunch of questions. We're going to start with some 5 general themes, and then we're going to get into your questions that you're going to put on Slido. So are you ready for this? Are you ready to hear from Latanya, from LT? Yes, I see lots of applause. Wonderful. All right. So we're gonna just jump right in, LT, okay? Are you ready for this? Okay.
I am. I'm so excited. I'm trying to keep up with the chat.
Oh yeah, I know, that's hard. And feel free to go anywhere you want with this. We've done this before, so I am up for anything. But I wanted to start just with a little framing, because the title of this is, the top 5 questions since I've left higher ed. And I think that title's a little of a misnomer, no? Because are you leaving higher ed? What's the dealio here? Because I don't know. That seems like a lot. And I think from what I know about your new job, it looks like you're going to be doing higher ed tech and advocacy. Is that correct?
Yeah. First of all, that was a crazy ass introduction, Heather. I'm like, who is this person you're talking about? And before I jump into it, if you don't mind, like me giving a little context about myself, because I think that's really important for people to hear. There may be some identities that I share with people, but I think understanding people's personal context is really important to a conversation like this. So number one, proud to share, I was a first generation college graduate. So first in my family to graduate from a 4-year institution. Proud transfer students. I went to 3 different undergraduate institutions. So that's a big part of my identity as well. I identify as a straight woman from a working class background. I'm married. I have 2 adult children. I'm 51 years old. I wrote some of this down. I have a bachelor's degree in English and a PhD in English. And so I think that's critical too, because I've made a couple of different pivots. This isn't my first pivot. So my formal training is in literature, and my my career goal at one point was to become a full-time faculty member. I don't have any formal training in student affairs or higher ed. I don't have any degrees in those things. From Northern Virginia, I put that in the chat. A shout out to the DC area. Okay, 2 more things. Because someone has asked me this before, like, what are your Clifton strengths? So I'll be sure to share maximizer, strategic, positivity. And then I'm also a proud Ravenclaw who really can't stand Harry Potter, which is so Ravenclaw. Okay, but to answer your question, so I do think it is a bit of a myth or a misconception that I've left higher ed. I actually have formally left working for a college or university. Like you said, I don't work for Menlo College anymore. But all the work that I do, like my whole day to day, all day long, is engaging with higher ed institutions. And so I like to think of myself more as like higher ed adjacent or something like that, right? It's similar to you, how you no longer work for a formal institution, but the work that you do with the Aspen Institute is very much engaged with it. And I think there's something that could be something really powerful about that. I know we're going to dig into it a little bit more, but all of that is needed. The folks working in higher ed institutions is really important, but then there are all these sorts of support that are critical, especially at this time, right? As we are rethinking what support looks like.
I love that. I love that. Someone in the chat put ecologies, not institutions. So it's like that, the ecosystem, the support systems that are around it. I love that. Thank you for sharing. And I loved your framing and sharing of identities. And if folks have questions, as a reminder, we're doing it in Slido. And if there's a question about what we're talking about right in the moment, feel free to put it in the chat, to jump in or put it in Slido, and I'll bring it forward as we're talking. But we're going to cover these 5 questions and then we're going to open it up, because we know you have a bunch of questions that are outside of the scope of this. But I love that, because I know that one of the worries when you see that as leaving higher ed is we're all, we're thinking about that right now. There's a great resignation. There are all these ideas of what's happening in higher ed. And so I'm sure that's something that came up for people when they learned that you were shifting jobs. And so I guess let's get right into that. Why did you leave? Like, was this part of the Great Resignation? Is this, what was it?
It's so funny because I don't, it's not like I was intentionally looking to leave. That really wasn't the case. So a little bit of context. I was another context, dean of student affairs at Menlo College for 1 year, literally January 4th, 2021 to January 4th, 2022. And it was probably around a year ago this time that Heather and I had a similar type of conversation where we were talking about just how does one navigate interview processes and things like that. That was so crazy, Heather. I never thought we'd be having this type of conversation a year later. So having said that, so no, I wasn't like actively intentionally saying I want to leave either my current job or higher ed more generally. But, and I'd love to hear, I love to know if folks who are here are in student support, although it doesn't matter, to be honest, but I would say, but especially if you're in student support or student affairs, we all know it was a really, really tough year. And my job at Menlo College overseeing student affairs meant health insurance, mental health support, housing, clubs and orgs, first year experience and transfer experience, conduct. And so there were so many, especially the mental health support. Students were struggling on so many fronts, and I'm sure you all are seeing this too, whether it's in your classrooms or in your programs or the resources that you offer, or you yourself are a student and experience this. It was really, really challenging, right? And so I would say the first 6 months of my job was an easier transition. It was actually, students were remote, even though I lived on campus. But when students came back, oh my gosh, I felt like my job changed tremendously. I started to feel anxious at a certain point. Like I said, I lived on campus. I literally lived among students in a residence hall. And there would come a time on Thursday night where the bass would start thumping in the res hall, and I would develop anxiety about, because there was very little distance or separation between myself and the students. There was just a lot all the time, constantly, mental health support, people, suicidal ideations. I'd never dealt with this before, right? And it was a really, really tough time. So those are a lot of challenges. And so I guess it made it easier for me to start thinking about other options. And I was recruited a few times actually for positions, or a couple of things where I had a couple of interviews and whatnot. And we'll talk more about career launch, because career launch isn't even a job that I applied for. But I guess that's to say the conditions were right for me to think about other options, if that makes sense.
That absolutely makes sense. And I guess I'd love to pause for a second and just talk about that a little bit more deeply. Of, it sounds like you did a lot of self-reflection of kind of what is organic to you at this moment? What is it that I want at this moment? And what is it that I want to do every day? That type of thing. Were you having those conversations with yourself to have that? Because I know as somebody who also changed, it's like, I love my job, but there were these moments of reflection on what it is that you want to be doing every day and the impact you want to make.
Yeah, so this is a true story. So sometime, was in May, I was being recruited for a position back in May, and I had a couple of interviews. Anyone from Menlo, now y'all know, I'm telling you now what happened. So all the way back in May, I went through a whole series of interviews, didn't get that job. It was with a tech company actually. But it made me also start to think about, like, what is it that I actually want right now? So funny thing about that position at Menlo, and this is how I like to think of it. Um, it was for what it was, Dean of Student Affairs. It was a good place to be, but I knew in my heart that I knew I wasn't going to retire there. Like I knew I was going to do something else. I didn't expect it to happen in just 1 year. That was unexpected, but I knew eventually I was going to move on, right? So I knew there was something else out there for me. And what I decided to do last July, funny enough, this is again, true story. I'm not making this up. I put together some slides because I'm a visual person. Uh, and I told my husband that I wanted to, we rented an Airbnb in San Francisco, my favorite city in the United States. And because it's just a place I go to recharge. And I wanted to get away. I didn't want to I didn't want to look at LinkedIn. I didn't want to look at any established job. I just wanted to reflect, like, what is it that I wanted? And I created some slides and thought about, like, what is it that I want to be doing? And I wasn't thinking about what job I wanted. I was like, what do I want my day to day to look like? That makes sense, right? And then I talked it out with my husband who is not in higher ed. And so poor thing was just like listening to me and giving me and giving me feedback. But Heather, I think that was a really, really important moment. And I saved those slides so that I would because they were pure. You know, I wasn't responding to anything. I wasn't upset because I didn't get a job. I wasn't, you know what I mean? It was just like me thinking about myself. Is this a good time for me to talk about the zone of genius?
I was going to say, I think
Okay.
it would be, if this is, I'd love, we have it later, but I think this is such a perfect opening for it. So I'd love to hear.
Okay. We can come back to it, but I don't know if she's here, but my good friend, Erica Morales, where are we? There we go.
I'll put the link in the chat. Yeah.
I had never heard this book until like a couple months ago. And Erica Morales, she's a professor at she's a professor in one of the Cal States. She suggested that I take a look at this book, and I think what's really helpful. And hold on, I can if I could share something real quick.
Yeah, you should be able to share screen, and I'm going to share the link for the book in the chat.
Okay. So the zone of genius just talks about like reflecting on what makes you. And I mean, there's a lot of texts that focus on this type of thing, right? But this is what stood out to me. So it talks about these 4 different zones. I just want to talk about the top 2, zone of genius and the zone of excellence. So zone of excellence is something where it says you're really good at this thing and you could be paid to do it. But I love this part. It says it doesn't set your soul on fire. And that's where I was with Menlo. Like I was an excellent dean of student affairs, but it did not set my soul on fire. I could have stayed. I could have, like, they were happy with me. I was generally happy there. I could have just stayed, but I just wanted something more. It's like, Heather, you and I talked about this before. It's like it's that romantic comedy. It's like the person that that gets left at the altar, right? And so the zone of genius is like what you're built to do, and that's really what I wanted to move toward. The only other thing I want to say about the zone of excellence, and I really hope people reflect on this, is that that's where a lot of people stay, at the zone of excellence. Like you're really good at it, and people are praising you for it, but doesn't really set you on fire. And that was the difference, right? So anyhow, that was really what I was pushing toward. Is that even at age 51,
it doesn't matter. The rom-com is always going. The age does not make a difference. Well, when you were talking about this with me the other day, I already have ordered the book because I was really inspired by it. But I I didn't know if maybe people just wanted to take a minute. We've got a lot of people in the room. We have like close to 100 people in the room.
Oh
And
my God. Oh, we do.
yeah, I thought it might be just a good reflection moment of you're here for a reason, right? You're here maybe because you love LT and you just want to hear about our life. Maybe you're here because you're having some self-reflection yourself on your own zone of genius or what you're doing in your profession. And maybe just take a beat, a second, just to maybe jot down a few of those things for yourself. Like, what is it that you want to be doing every day right now? What is it that, where are those lines that LT was just talking about, of the things that you really love to do and that you could get paid for do, but it's not what's the fire that's burning in you? What is it that you really want to do every day? And it can be scary to think about that, but like, let's just pause for a minute. I'm going to mute and just jot a few things down for yourself so we can continue this conversation from that place. Okay, I just wanted to take a second. I don't want to ruin our momentum on this because it's such a great conversation, but I did want everybody to just take a minute to reflect on why they're here today, because as LT said, it's a scary prospect, right? It's not necessarily something that we spend a lot of time in. I'm sure everybody's in their jobs because they're passionate about something in their jobs, but are you really, is it the thing that's driving you, that's giving you that spark, and that is that fire? So I really love that LT shared that and shared her. We're going to talk about vision boards in a little bit because I know that's something that LT's into, and I've been learning from her. So thanks for sharing your screen and sharing that experience and that book, so that can really kind of influence the way that we have the rest of the conversation. Okay, so you talked about why the gig. Now let's maybe get into the practicals. How did you get this new gig? And what is this new gig?
Okay, again, all stories are true, friends. So let me also say one more thing that was important too when I said that I created those slides, and sharing them with my husband was really important because number one, I said it out loud what I wanted to do, but also because it was a way of someone keeping me accountable, right? So he heard them, and so anytime I would come up with another idea, he's like, "Was that one of your slides?" And those of you who know Rob know that he said it just like that. Because we could get scattered, right? And so I came up with these things that I wanted to do, and I honestly started taking off my plate things that didn't align with that, right? Oh, Tiffany, you made it. I know you sent me a text, but I couldn't look at my phone. So
welcome, Tiffany.
Okay, so like Heather mentioned, I now work for Career Launch. I've had a relationship with Career Launch for a couple of years now. I've known the founder, I can't even remember how, not a super long time, but I've known the founder for a while. And he was just like a good thought partner for me. He says we met at a conference, and I don't remember. This goes back to the rom-com theme, right? He was like, "You were speaking. I said hello. You dissed me." But I honestly don't even remember all that. Hey, Melissa. Um, and so Sean was like really passionate about this company, and the mission of the company really spoke to me, right? And so I ended up doing some work for him. I consulted on a book that he wrote. I ended up writing the foreword for that book. And I think it was last year. I think it was sometime in 2021. Sean said to me, LT, you should come work for me. And I was like, you can't afford me. Period. Done. Because I was thinking it was a startup, and while it was growing, I just I didn't think that that was a good move for me, right? But I had maintained this relationship with him, so I would check in with him periodically. He knew about what was going on at Menlo. He knew about that one job I was telling you all about earlier that I had been interviewing for. So he was just a good connection that I had. So he sort of heard me like think through all of my he just heard my thought process. And at a certain point, I even shared with him those slides, like, this is what I want to do. And we were hanging out one day. No, before that, he invited me to work for him on the weekend, like do like a little, like 5 hours a week, I think. No, 5 hours a month. I think it was 5 hours a month. And it was a paid gig. And I was like, okay, it was a good way to like be connected and all of that. So then we were hanging out, we had a happy hour, and he's like, I want you to come work for me. And he literally opened up his laptop and like had this whole thing written out, right? And that was very flattering. And he was like telling me all these things, all these ways I could contribute to the mission of Career Launch. And I said, let me think about it, right? I love what they were doing, but I was concerned about like salary and things like that, right? So the offer was actually below my current salary. There was a lot of upside. So one of the big differences in working in this field was, getting paid commission and bonuses. Like, what? Like, I'm not used to commission working for a college or university. So there was a lot of potential upside, or potential to make a lot of money, but the base salary was below my current salary. So I
This is
thanked him.
Yeah,
Huh?
sorry, Ellie, I didn't mean to interrupt you. This is going to sound silly maybe, but can you talk a little bit about what that means, even commission and bonuses, like in a minute when we get there? I just want
Yeah,
to
just remind me.
Yep, I'll
Yeah,
remind you.
yeah. So I said no. I thanked him for his offer. And I said, I'm happy to continue consulting with you, but that offer isn't going to work for me. And he came back and he met what I said that I needed. And so I said yes at that point. So base salary means this is like what I get paid no matter what may come, right? So Career Launch is a social enterprise, which if you kind of think of it as like an intersection between like a nonprofit and a for-profit business. So it's a mission-driven company, and the money that I mean, there's profit to be made for sure, but a lot of that profit goes back into the company. So, but anyway, wait, I forgot where I was going with that. But okay, so with Career Launch, it's a curriculum. They're products. They're things that we're selling to institutions, right? It's technical services. It is ed tech. My job specifically is as outreach and partnerships with 2- and 4-year institutions, which is huge. Like that's the whole country I'm playing with. So if a sale is made, if a school decides to partner, if UCLA decides to partner with Career Launch and there's like a sale made, it means that I get commission on whatever that is, right? I get a percentage of that. And if Career Launch as a team meets certain goals every quarter, then we get bonuses as well. So I get my base salary and whatever, and a percentage of any sales that are made that I shepherded, and bonuses based on goals met.
Wow. Thank you for specifying that, just because that's something definitely we don't necessarily deal with at institutions or even nonprofits. So wasn't sure if everyone knew exactly what that
Great
meant
question.
even. We were getting some great questions in the Slido, but I want to continue on our top 5, and then we're going to break into some of those more specific questions that are popping up. So thank you everybody for keeping those coming in our Slido, and you can find that link in the chat. All right, so you talked a little bit about why this job and how this job and what this job is.
Okay.
The couple of the questions that are in the chat, and I know a couple of questions that have come up between us, is just talking a little bit about if there's any or what type of guilt there might be associated around leaving a job, especially a job that's very student focused. I don't know about you, but I've gotten a lot of like, how could you leave? You're you're doing this work with students and you're so good and they need you right now. And they do, and things are really tough right now. But I'm wondering how what was that like for you, making that choice to leave a direct student to student interaction and take on this new gig that now is doing things at scale with institutions and not students directly?
That's such a great question. I'm glad we're having that conversation. I remember I posted something on Facebook. I don't remember exactly what I said, but sometime last year, where I said something like about how difficult this year was, right? It was one of the most challenging professional experiences I ever had, mostly because of COVID and mental health and some of the things that people are putting in the chat. And George Turner, who you all know is like my brother, he said, but if anyone is able to handle it, it's you, LT, right? And I was like, fuck that. I just like rejected this idea that I needed to shoulder that burden, right? Especially as a Black woman. Like I just was not having it. And so I want to answer this in 2 ways, Heather. One, like just I guess on a personal individual level, sure, it was I made, even then it was a short year, but it was a very impactful, meaningful year for me with those students, especially as Dean of Student Affairs, right? Those students were going through a lot. But I'm very accessible. On a lot of my students from Menlo in particular connect with me on Instagram, like even now. I think so I find ways to still stay connected with students. But I also had to put myself first. I really needed to think about what I needed at that time. Remember, y'all, I was living on campus too. And so there was so little separation. I literally was 500 yards from my office to my apartment. It was just way too much. And so step 1 was me moving off campus. Like that was supposed to be a part of my job, was living on campus, but I moved off in October. I was like, it just wasn't worth it. Even though the housing was we didn't have to pay for that housing. I was like, my health and sanity were just way too important. So that there was that. The other thing I want to say, which is maybe a little bit deeper, is that students have a lot of models for people who stay in toxic environments, especially if you're first gen, working class, coming from an immigrant background. You see your mother, a lot of the women in your family especially, stay in those situations. We're the models for people who leave. That's what students need to see. Someone who walks away. Where's the role model for that, right? And so that's so important. And honestly, there were students who would come to my office and even say to me, Dean LT, we know we come to you for a lot. Have you thought about leaving? Like, seriously, I had students come to me, Lily, shout out to Liliana Chesler, who would just say, I love you so much, Dean LT, but I know this is a lot on your plate right now. So we have to remember that students need to see when someone steps away from an environment that's not working for them.
I don't know if you're seeing it in the chat, but everybody needed to hear that right now. And it's just hashtag retweet.
Is that Adrian? That's probably Adrian.
We all can relate to that, and everybody is really it's really resonating with folks in the room. And I think just as somebody who had to leave working with students and loved that job, I felt that too, and had students are the best teachers because they're the ones that are like, you're always telling us, and I'm sure this is what Lily was saying to you, is you're telling us to go out and be that badass in the world and be that leader in the world. And if you're not doing it, then you're not practicing what you're telling your students and what you're preaching. So I love that. Thank you for sharing that, because that personally resonates with me, as well as it looks like many in this room.
Yeah, Heather.
Yeah, the oxygen mask, someone's saying, put the oxygen mask on yourself before others. Yeah.
Well, I just want to say, Dr. Heather Adams, I remember we didn't talk about it in this way, right? But I remember so clearly how you felt, how conflicted you felt about leaving UCLA, because you were the transfer everything, right? And it was such a powerful moment for you to walk away, and sometimes I think our concern is like, oh, what about the students, or what if things fall apart?
Yeah.
I say my legacy is untested, right? if it falls apart, that's on you. Oh, thank you, Amy. All dues paid. I'm walking away, right? And so like it's so for you, Heather, like it was unquestionable all that you did for transfer students and for other students at UCLA. So if after you leave, people don't put resources into it, well, hey, that's on them.
Well, thank you for saying that. I do remember those conversations, many of them, and your wonderful words to help kind of process through that and be in the muck with it, because it's a real thing and it's a real experience that we're feeling, and then moving on and experiencing this new joy that we get to have in our jobs now, doing things nationally and at this different scale. So shifting a little bit from that kind of personalization of the job and how it was shifting personally, I did want to get back to your vision board and thinking big and looking, because I know you have some cool things to share. So before we dive into audience questions and all these incredible questions that are popping up, I want to get into the vision board, what it means, what it is, and what you would tell us all about that process. Sure.
Before the vision board, shout out to just real quick. I just want to acknowledge the folks who are here, who, like me, came up through like the research ranks, right? The faculty ranks, or either gained a PhD or plan a PhD, but may consider like, wow, this isn't for me, because I did that too. So this book, Going Alt-Ac, yeah. Anyway, A Guide to Alternative Academic Careers is really great for I think it's really written for someone who's currently in a PhD program and thinking about other careers. I would say take a look. This shall be gifted to Marissa Cervantes right after this. So that's that's another resource. But yes, so I've been creating vision boards for a number of years now. Initially, when I did them, I actually cut out, there are these things called magazines, right?
Do you want to describe those people who might not know what they are?
Man, good old days. And I used to actually get them printed, but you cut out. Basically, it is as it sounds, where you sort of think about, imagine keep your full, imagine something, imagine you imagine the world that you want to create, right? And then you go about putting it together. The downside to magazines are just they aren't as widely, so I mean, you can get them, right? But not like when they aren't as accessible as they once were. I actually use Pinterest now. And Pinterest, what I like about Pinterest is like magazines, you're a little bit limited to whatever is in the magazine. But with Pinterest, if there's something that you want, you already have it in mind, you could just Google it and then put it into the Pinterest board. So I've gotten more detailed and more specific in my vision board for Pinterest, and I'll show it to you in a second. But it's basically toward the end of the year, I start to think about what are my goals for the next year? What is it that I want to be doing? What do I want my work life to look like? Yeah, Michael, exactly. It's all about manifesting. And so well, hold on, let me share real quick. So this is 2021. And when I say I get specific, I get really specific. So I started it, I should say, before 2021, and then I add to it as the year goes on, right? Because there are other things that come up, like, oh, I got to account for COVID, that type of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, I like that you add to it. That's so cool.
Oh yeah, definitely add to it. So last year, so the things at the bottom were the older things, and it gets more, and then the things at the top are the newer. So a year ago, I was transitioning to Menlo College. So I was trying to imagine what I wanted that to be like. My vision board includes people that inspire me. So I'm a complex person. I got Kamala Harris and I got Megan Thee Stallion, both inspiring women. I was thinking about, again, like my physical space, the landscape, what my hair, what I wanted my hair to look like. I knew I wanted to focus on the Black First Gen Collective. I knew I wanted this sweater. My son got me that, ended up getting me that sweater for Mother's Day, I think it was. I was in the middle of a book proposal on custodians. And so I just wanted to manifest that. I wanted to adjunct, that ended up happening. I ended up creating a food pantry at Menlo. I wanted these shoes. I got those shoes. So it could be anything. It could be words, it could be phrases, it could be, so for me, it's not just professional, it's professional and personal. It's like my whole life. I wanted to go to a Giants game, all kinds of things. So didn't make it to summer league. Those cleats just aren't practical, y'all. Like, I love those cleats, but like, I'm not just like, what am I going to do with those cleats, really? So
but they got the flash.
They just had the flash. So that was just inspiration. So that was last year, and so I have a vision board for this year, and it's different. Like, the tone is different because I look at my Pinterest board regularly, because it's something I remind myself of what my goals are, and it gives me something to move toward. And it's private, it's personal, right? I wouldn't share this with anyone this year because, like Michael said, I'm manifesting it, right? I'm happy to share it after this year. But right now, like, me and God, we having a conversation right now.
It's happening. I know. I love that one, I just love this vision board idea because I haven't thought about it since being a kid. We used to do it with the magazines, right? And now it's like, what a perfect idea. And I love I love the blend of life, because here's the reality is there's no balance. Like, balance does not exist. Like, it's all about a blend, right? You're not going to, like, we always say we're going to try to find a balance in life. And it's really just about these blends of work and life. And I've always been a little surprised that people are so good at compartmentalizing their different parts of life. And I love that you just have, like, I like these shoes. I like this sweater. I want to be this person. Like, it's all the same because it's all related to you and what you're manifesting. Yeah. I love that. Wow, cool. Someone says they use Canva.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's cool. I love that.
Shout out to you, Cynthia.
Yeah, great. Thanks for sharing, Cynthia. I might do that too.
Do what works. All that to say, do what works for you. That's right. The main thing. Like, Pinterest is that works well for me. If people try that and it doesn't work, try Canva, try cutting things out. Like the whole point, the point isn't the method, right? Or it's the purpose. The purpose is the important thing. Like, what are your goals, and continue to revisit them. Put them someplace where you can see them. I think that's the important thing.
I love that. Oh, I love that someone added April's put harmony, because yeah, the word balance always throws me, but harmony is beautiful, or blend,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, and I actually bought, after talking to LT,
Let me see.
well, you can't really see it. It's basically just a what's it called? The pinup board. Yeah. I was like, I just, after our conversation, I just went to Target. I was like, I'm just gonna do it. Oh, you have it too. It's the same one, I think, with the, yeah. Also bought them for the transfer center. If you've ever been to UCLA, you'll see about 3 of them up there. Clearly I missed them. All right, well.
Right here in my office.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so this is incredible stuff. Thank you for sharing all of that. And those were sort of our general 5 questions that we know you've been getting a lot in the vein of those questions. But now we're going to open it up, because everybody's putting all kinds of questions into the Slido. So I'm just going to kind of start with a few. LT, before I do that, is there anything that we didn't cover in our 5 top questions? Because I know you and I had a conversation. There was a lot of ground. There was rom-coms, there was, vision boards. Is there anything that you want to share just from the reflecting on these top questions and this conversation so far?
I was literally typing this into the chat, so I'll go ahead and say it now, which is I think I'm basing this off of some of the comments that I see, the posts that I see in the expatriates and higher ed Facebook group, which is like 18,000 people or something like that. It's crazy. So thanks to Mel for inviting me to it. What I often notice in that group, or just general conversations about leaving higher ed, is a lot of people have identified their push factors, that why they want to leave, like the burnout, the low pay, the lack of recognition. The harder part is to think about, what are your pull factors? What is it that you're drawn toward? And I think that's a really, really crucial step, is to start thinking about who you are. And like you had said, Heather, I forgot how you put it, but like, what do you want to be doing? What are you so passionate about, that you're getting paid for it? And those things may likely change over time. That's totally fair. Like at one point, being director of first year experience at UCLA was my dream job. I'll agree with. But start thinking about what your pull factors are. That's really important, and not just, and in so doing, when people are thinking about, oh, I've got all this experience in res life or as an academic advisor, what does this mean in ed tech or something like that? But that's a focus only on responsibility, right? And so what I'm encouraging people to do is just think about that a little bit differently, and like, what makes you you? Because, let me go back to career launch real quick. I remember I said at one point, it was outside of career launch, I was like, you know what? I have like so much capital on a national level. I know so many people across so many different institutions across the country. I would love a job where that's what I do, is talk to people at different schools. I literally said that. Because and what job and you can't Google that, right? You can't, like, there was no job description that said this is the job. And also, to put a bow on that, my conversation with Sean, also keep in mind that job was not posted. He created that job for me because he knew me and he knew what he needed at that time. So me having that relationship with him, and me staying in touch, telling him what I wanted, even turning him down, all of that was really important, right? So so that's why I say it's important to think to like say what it is that you want to do, because it could totally happen, right? I don't mean to romanticize it, but what do you have to lose? I guess is one way to think about it.
I am so glad that you brought it to that, because one of the things I was going to say from our conversation before that I want to make sure we touched on is communicating to people what it is that you want. Because if you're not saying to other folks, if you're not talking about it, talking it through, whether that's in a slide deck with your partner or whether that's with somebody who can have the potential to hire you later, I would put money down that most of us here have our positions now because of some connection of folks that we knew, right? And so if you're not talking about it, you're not fleshing it, doesn't mean you have to have it all figured out, but if you're not talking about what it is that pulls you and drives you and puts that fire into you, then you do have a lot to lose because nobody's aware of what it is that's burning in you for that. And you can get a lot of perspective from that too, like whether it's Rob reminding you what's aligning with the things that you said you want to do, whether it's you shifting and adjusting your manifestation of what you want, or whether it's somebody giving you feedback about what they see as your superpower. It can all, or whether it's a job offer, it can all open up those opportunities. So tell people, talk to them. Okay.
Oh, I have homework for the group, so we'll get
Oh,
to
good.
that.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I can't wait for that. Okay, so let's get to some of our Q&A.
Yes, let's do it.
And we'll put a reminder in the chat about where to put questions, but I'm just pulling a few questions. There are some that are aligned with what we've already covered. So if I skip it, it's just because we've kind of covered it over already. But somebody is bringing up, there's a couple people talking about this adjustment from internal higher ed politics to corporate world. And you're new in your new gig, so this might be something you're still discovering, but have you had any moments of clear adjustment between the two?
Oh, yeah. And I'm 2 weeks old into this job, right? So on a superficial level, this particular position, so it's not representative of all things, but in my job, we start at 7:30 every day, right? And I am a morning person, but like up and going at 7:30, that's really different. The flip side though is that Fridays we're done at noon. So I know. So I guess the other thing, I mean, people know it, I'll just say it, but there's politics in every position. No position is perfect. And so it's just important that I communicate with Sean, who's our founder, like what works for me and draw some boundaries. And it's important that he's open to my feedback. So whether it's, I'm just trying to think of something. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but yeah, I just have to make sure that, yeah, go ahead.
Well, you were talking to me about the website stuff and kind of
right.
how you were negotiating, like how you were like kind of this has been his baby for a long time, right? And now you're coming in, you're new and you've got ideas, and it's working on how to weave those together.
Yes. And so for me, it's been important to remind him of why he brought me on board, right? Like, these are my strengths. This is what I'm good at. And so this is the feedback I'm going to offer. And I do it in a very tactful way, but I'm also pretty clear and direct as well. And I just think that's just a good strategy, no matter where you are. So I don't know that that's particular to being inside or outside of higher ed, to be honest.
That's a great point. Okay, so this is a little related to being in higher ed and then leaving out of higher ed. Someone's interested in your academic background in literature, right? Sort of where you started and how that's helped you in your professional career throughout, and now in this new world out of higher ed institutions and into higher ed tech and advocacy. Background.
Well, I'm always interested in narrative, right? Even my approach to first generation students is about storytelling. or identity. So that has never changed. My interest in representation is always there. That really is the work that I do with the First Gen and Juice platform in particular, where I'm always like, oh my God, you're the first gen character in Spider-Man or whatever. That's still there. And so I have particular outlets for that. I think, research, duh, like being a researcher, I'm just a researcher at heart. And so I think, so if those of you who are in grad school or about to go to grad school, the one thing you'll learn is that you're going to feel stupid a lot. Like that's what grad school does, makes you feel like you don't know anything and makes you feel stupid. But you have to remember you gained a lot of skills. So research is one of them, but also like project management and things like that. That's why that whatever that alternative academic careers book is helpful, is really practical to help remind people what their skill sets are. And so it's I'm not talking about American literature anymore. So the content is the content changes, but my approach is pretty consistent, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I still teach, so I teach formally, like adjuncting, but also in my role with Career Launch, we do career coaching. That's just teaching. That's facilitating conversation.
Yeah, you're using it all the time, even just in your, but I would say the first thing you said with narrative and research too, of sharing the journey and figuring out how to translate that story. That's one thing you're really good at, is how do I translate that story to have an impact on a particular audience, right? And that's really using kind of your specific background in literature in that.
Thanks, Heather.
Yeah, you got it. Okay, so this is an interesting chain of questions that are kind of around, I guess I would say, a little bit of toxic environment in higher ed and negative experience and how you deal with sort of the trauma of higher ed and leaving. So the question is multiple. There are a couple of questions in this arc, but I think general gist is, what advice would you have for folks who are maybe feeling some of that toxic work culture in academia and are trying to figure out how they navigate it, how they find their own time to reconsider, the work norms that you've done or the things that you really respect and want to do with your day? How do you navigate the intensity right now during the pandemic mixed with toxic environment in higher ed that can be a reality, and still focusing on your own needs, your own drive, so that you can thrive in whatever you do next?
Wow.
Big question, I know, but I'm combining 3 questions here that are in the same vein.
Oh no, I got it. I mean, these are real. These are great questions. This goes back to why I started with myself, right? And my context. Everyone's context is different, so I don't want to make any presumptions about what people can and cannot do, right? So there's that. Because some people, for whatever reason, can't just walk away from, you don't walk away from a job, but some people can't leave their jobs, right? For whatever region, whatever, right? But for me, that obviously was on the table, because I'll just say I left UCLA for a reason. But even if you're looking, you still have to figure out how do you sustain yourself while you're still there, right? So for me, like, boundary setting is really important for me. And so whether it's are you communicating with your supervisor about how much work you're given are you expected to work on the weekends or not, right? When are you expected to check your email? I remember when I was at UCLA, I did a lot of jigsaw puzzles. I colored, there were things I had to do that were just important for me. Sometimes I would just come home and lay on the floor and not talk to anybody. So I had to do some things that were able to sustain me. I had to make sure I was in community with people like you, Amy Baldwin, Mel, Erica Morales. There's just some really important people who knew me really, really well so that I didn't have to keep telling my story over and over again, and who could also reflect back to me what they were seeing going on too. So basically having a circle of trust is so important to help you get through those environments. And I know even at Menlo, when things were starting to get tough, I would just have to have some clear and direct conversations with my supervisor and write down what my concerns were, because you can you get in your head and you have these meetings and you can get emotional and things like that, but just like, what is the ask for a conversation, for what is the ask basically, right? So those are some of the strategies that I employed. And then obviously, like I said before, another strategy was leaving too.
Yeah, exactly. So in that, I love that. And you gave some real practical advice on kind of how to deal with asking yourself about leaving. I think another part of this question is about fear of leaving higher ed, fear of the unknown, doubts that might come in, sneaking in about leaving what you've known, and how you overcame those types of feelings.
Well, everything is a risk, friend. You got to remember that. I think we can get deluded into thinking that if we're in a comfortable place, we're at a place like UCLA, next thing you know, your job is gone, right? So nothing is guaranteed. You have to just keep that in mind. Again, also my personal context was that I also have a history of pivoting out, so that wasn't uncomfortable for me. I mean, considering I earned a PhD and chose, before I even finished that PhD, not to pursue a tenure track. I was already inclined to do that, right? But back then I had the support of people like Sam Pinto, Molly Hyro, Andrew Sargent, et cetera, some folks in my department that really supported me along the way. So that was really helpful. The other thing I want to acknowledge too is that this is why I said at the beginning, I'm not personally invested in student affairs. I only worked in student affairs for 5 years total. I did a lot of student support, but not student affairs. I think what can happen is when your identity gets caught up into your work, like you know what I mean, Heather? Like you got your master's in it, or you grew up through res life and all that type of stuff, and you feel like you owe the industry something.
Well, I think you could say that's what I did a little bit with the transfer stuff. You were getting at that, but certainly you can do it to yourself with your own identity and your own. Right. Yep.
Yeah, and then especially, not exclusively, but I would say especially if you're first gen, you feel like you owe like, oh my gosh, they gave me my shot, they gave me my chance, I'll stick it out. Amy said, all dues paid. You don't owe people things.
I love that. Now, shifting gears a little bit, although this one that just popped up is a little related. So before we switch gears, two things that are in this world of what are you doing about kind of the feelings, the fear and the doubt and the guilt that come in. What did you do to provide, I'm going to choose a different word because I don't love the word closure. What did you do to help your own self and your students work through the sadness and frustration and anger and fear and all of the things that happen when you leave and when there's a change and when there's a transition?
I'm not the right person to ask this. What
But
is
was there any
sadness?
type of
Okay,
closure
okay,
or any type of event or anything that you did that helped that?
I'll be serious. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm saying this because there's a reason why I left. You know what I mean? So okay, anyway. So with Menlo, there, yes, I had formed some really close relationships, especially with my staff. I love my staff so much, and then the students, of course, too. And so had really candid conversation with them when I had the job, well, when I had the job offer with my staff. And my staff, honestly, they cheered for me. Like it wasn't what other people might have expected. They were like, "You got this. We knew it. Like we support you because of our relationship, right?" So that I also was pretty upfront with students, and I told students they could ask me any question that they wanted. Thanks to Mel, who helped me come up with my social media strategy in terms of like, what do I say when, what do I say on Instagram, what do I say on LinkedIn? Um, so I did not want a party or anything like that. But that's just who I am. I'm not someone who likes attention or anything. So I just so you all know, I am not that person that's crying because that's just not me.
It just goes back to your point of know yourself, everybody is so different. We all have different ways of dealing it. And somebody else might want that huge party to kind of have a send off and be like the end, and that's
Be you.
great to do. Just know what it is for you.
Know what it is, yeah. And honestly, like my last day at Menlo, I was in COVID isolation, so it didn't happen anyway. But that's it's not my style. I'm in touch with the students I'm really close with. I'm still in touch with, right? So yeah, that wasn't a big deal for me personally.
Got it. Okay, so we're going to switch gears in a minute to go kind of more to some practicals of job stuff. Yes, but before then, who are your inspirations? Do you have folks? We saw a bunch of people on your vision board. Are there folks that are your inspirations specifically that you think about?
Like anyone?
Anyone. It just said, who are your inspirations? Probably career, maybe focused. I don't know, but it didn't specify.
Let's see. Like my all-time inspirations would be like Harriet Tubman, So I mean I can respond. I'm looking at this year's vision board. So she's not on the wall yet. So like Harriet Tubman, my mom, I really appreciate, I'm gonna reach out to Tia Brown McNair, who works for AACNU, like check in with her. I don't know. Did I say Malcolm X yet? Malcolm X. Those come to mind. Who's on my Pinterest board this year is Dave Grohl, from Nirvana, Foo Fighters. That's just where my head's at right now. Reading Dave. I mean, I'm a longtime fan, but I'm actually reading Dave's memoir right now, and it's really speaking to me. Imagine being the top of the world in the world's biggest band at age 25, and all that's taken away from you, and then you have to pivot, right? And like the insecurity he had of how does he go on from being that guy in Nirvana to being something else at 25? That's so young, right? And then he had to reinvent himself. I don't know that he had to reinvent himself. He had to like go within and show the world who he was, and not just a drummer. So anyway, Dave is on my mind right now.
I love that. I love that. Okay. So we're going to now get into a little bit of practicals. This runs the gamut from resume tips to negotiation practices and other trainings and certificates and credentials that you would suggest. So maybe
I'm terrible at this. Okay,
yeah.
push me.
This is a really good one that I think can get us into this conversation in a practical way. Is besides your own personal drive and your own personal structures that you've set up for yourself, what other strategies did you use to help and manifest your professional goals? So like coaching or mentorship. And I know this is something that's big in your life as your relationships and the folks that are around you. Were there other strategies that you used in communication with the folks around you during this time of achieving your professional goals?
Hang on, let me switch.
Oh, okay. Earbuds are dying. And I think someone else did write clarification on that, inspirations. It was for courage and resilience and personally and professionally, which I think you got to, and all of those amazing suggestions. Oh, are you still with us? Can you hear me? I don't think we can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, so the question is, like, what now?
Oh, your sound is going a little funky on us. Can you hear me talk when I'm talking? Okay. You're a little quiet. We're not hearing you so much.
Still bad?
Oh, that's better. That's better. Okay, so what other strategies outside of your own personal drive? Was there folks that you talked to? Did you use coaching or mentoring or a recruiter or anything outside of your own personal drive and skills on this job search journey or this professional shift you just made?
Well, this one was different because I didn't apply for this job. So remember that I didn't pay for any coaching or anything like that. I think the skill I employed was maintaining relationships. I guess that's the main thing. Like I said, I already knew Sean. I had no idea this would lead to a job whatsoever. So it was just the fact that I stayed in touch with him. I communicated with him what my goals were, and he saw me being me. So that this isn't the same kind of story as someone who was like active. I understand where people are coming from, but in this case, this is a story of me actively looking for a new job. But and that's so important, y'all. Though, like you need to know that this is a way to get jobs too.
Yeah, exactly. Because our last conversation that we did on this topic was really focused on who are your cheerleaders, your sponsors, your coaches, your mentors.
Yes.
I remember we were and you know what, I'll try to find the link to that. So if folks, because we did record that one too, if that one was more about practicalities of, if you're doing this in the traditional way and you're filling out resumes, if you're thinking about a recruiter, what is a recruiter? You talked about all of that. And so I'll post that in the chat as well, so folks can listen to that one if they're interested, because this really was this was more about your network and your actual kind of personal journey in what your zone of area of focus was going to be, and those are two really different things. But in that way, that folks were asking some questions about tips on resumes and skills and that you should highlight in cover letters. I think we do cover that in the other one, so I will post that link. Anything you want to say on those kind of practicalities, LT?
It doesn't apply in this situation. I do think that conversation we had a year ago is really important. Yeah. I would say, friends, how do I want to put this? There can be a certain level of comfort in terms of always working on your resume, right? Or refining your cover letter. Mm-hmm. Now there's another step you need to take, which is the networking. That's harder. that actually is harder, because what'll happen is you could polish up your resume to kingdom come, and guess what? Somebody else will still get that job because they knew somebody on the committee. And you're like, oh, but my resume. It didn't matter what your resume was. You're more likely to get hired if someone knows you. So the emphasis, I would say, is putting yourself out there and get to know people, so that when a job comes up, you're that person. You get to be that person that they were going to hire you anyway, right? Like, you can apply, but we're like, we know we're going to hire Heather. How many?
I'm seriously though, that is, I mean, even in our own, we know that, just, we hope that our staff and our team is going to share this out with folks they know, because we want to bring in folks that folks know, that are vetted, that they've worked with before, that they've had connections with before, that they know and can trust. And so it happens. It does happen.
And you look up and you ask yourself, how'd that fool get the job? That fool knew somebody already.
Exactly. Okay, so this is another one though that I do think probably you could talk about, because you just you did this outright. Negotiations, tips for just saying, like, here's what I want. Sounds to me like you just said, here's what you got to meet, mister. Like here's where I am and here's what it'll take. How was that experience, and what advice would you give to folks?
That literally was what it was, Heather. Like, I had to be willing to walk away from that offer. And again, I understand people have different contexts. So I get that, but it meant before that I needed to talk to my partner and think about what was reasonable. I have an adult child and I'm paying for her college education. Like I said, I'm 51. This wasn't the time for me to, like, oh, take a pay cut and all that. So I just said, this is the number where I need to be. Shout out to Eve Hudson, who I talked to with regard to this as well. She was like, LT, you work too hard to make X amount of money, So yeah, that honestly was not a hard conversation, because I had to know what I wanted and what was important to me. And I shared that with him, and I was super friendly about it. I was like, hey, I understand. I would love for our partnership to continue. Like I said, I was already consulting for them. I was like, I'm happy to keep consulting with you. And he gave it some thought and came back.
Tell people what you want, folks. Just tell people what you want.
And and we're saying it like it's not that easy. We get that, and sometimes it's helpful to practice with a friend or to like write it out first. But have something in mind for sure.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, we don't have to talk about this story, but I was terrible at it. I mean, like, really bad at it. I called LT after my negotiation conversation. I was like, well, that was awful. It was just, because I hadn't practiced it. I didn't know, I practiced it a little bit with her, but, I just was unsure instead of really knowing kind of my own, I don't know, worth or what have you, and just sort of saying it straight. It doesn't mean they're going to say yes, but you do have to have a little bit of confidence in just saying it and knowing that that's your bottom line. Okay, a couple of other questions before we wrap up for the evening. Let's see, or day. Sorry, I'm on East Coast time.
People are all over.
Yeah, we're from everywhere. So this is a really interesting one. In your new job, how are you tackling institutional barriers when chatting with institutional leaders who may not have an impact in creating those barriers?
Okay, can you restate that?
Yeah, so I'm thinking the question is getting at, when you're talking about institutional barriers and you're working with leaders that weren't necessarily the folks who built those barriers or who were created those barriers, how are you talking with them and working with them to dismantle those barriers when they weren't the ones that originally created them?
Okay, so number one, I don't go in trying to dismantle a barrier. So for example, I talked to someone at an institution big public institution in the South that about career services, and their feeling is that all students get jobs if they have this degree, right? We come on now. We all know that this person said, if a student doesn't get a job after going to this institution, is because they don't want a job, right? Like, that's inequitable and all that. It would not do me any good to say, oh, sir, that's inequitable, right? So I hear people out and I listen and ask a lot of questions and try to understand their perspective. And again, those of you who know me will laugh because this is just who I am. I reached out to the person on LinkedIn, made a connection with them. Great chatting with you today. I sent them a link to something. I made reference to an article that they wrote. I made that person my friend. That's what I'm doing. And now we're on LinkedIn and they see what I post, and then he's written me back. And so it's really about forming relationships with people, and you chip away at it, right? I always go back to, one of my inspirations, Bruce Lee, be a drop of water, right? You just keep dripping, like, okay, they'll come around. I think that saves us a lot of frustration.
It's so true.
Right?
Yeah, that's it. You're nurturing relationships, you're managing relationships, it's trust too. Because why am I listening to you? Like, if you're going to come in and just sort of tell me all the things I'm doing wrong, why am I listening to you?
Right.
Versus if you're coming in and now I'm in a different relationship with you and I have this different type of tone that's going on, and now it's a conversation and a discussion about how to move forward with something rather than a sort of list of the things that I need to do differently. I love that. This is a great one. Everybody's, by the way, lots of thank yous in the chat, in the Slido, lots of thank you for, being here and for your time, and everyone's really appreciative of this. I love this one. What are you looking forward to most in this new current role?
So sweet. What I love about where I am right now is that in addition to the work that I do, like I get to be myself and my best, but I'm like a starter. I love things. I love stepping in at the beginning of things, and this company is young enough that I can have my imprint on it. So a great example of that, like we've talked about before, Heather, with the website, like coming in and like saying we need to make some changes to the website. Or I told Sean, like, I'm taking over the LinkedIn. He's like, okay, fine. And so I can still like shift the direction that the company is going. That's really fun. That's really exciting.
I'm so excited to see you just thrive in that. There's so much room here. It's going to be so fun to watch you as it goes. So this is an interesting one that's very specific. I think maybe it might be a student. I'm not sure what perspective this is coming from, but what are some critical questions to be asking faculty at these universities to make sure they truly support students like me that identify as a first gen college students? So, this is probably to the students out there. If you're working with faculty, what are some ways to have conversations with them that might help create better supports and better support nets for the communities that need it?
Well, I hope if they're still here, I hope some of the faculty in the space will add to this conversation, especially in the chat. It's also important to remember the average faculty, I think that person said they were first gen, right? Or was a student of color. Average faculty, not first gen. And so, you, to the degree in which you feel comfortable sharing a bit about your own background is important. There's no need to like tell, there's no need for, what do they call that? Poverty porn or anything like that. But sharing a little bit about yourself, like what your context is really helpful. But I would also say you can be direct in asking, how does your department support Black students? How does your department support queer students? or first gen students or what have you. And you gotta, but you gotta live with that answer. That's the thing. Like you can't have in your, like they'll tell you one thing, we ain't got it, and you're like, oh, but I still want to go to Stanford anyway. Okay, well that's on you. Stanford told you we ain't got no support, and you decided to go to Stanford anyway. So you need to find out like who has the support, and if you know, and leverage that. I remember facing something very similar. This is, you know, years ago, but when I was starting choosing my doctoral programs, I really, really, really wanted to go to UPenn. That was my top choice. It was on the East Coast. It was Ivy League. It was close to home versus UCLA. And UPenn did not, I could feel it was not a good feeling. And then I visited UCLA, which is where I met, you know, Molly and Andrew, et cetera, et cetera. But it was, the support was there, right? But also remember, as a student, you have a voice, and you can make a difference. So shout out to Jessica Riddell at NC State, who just started first gen grad program there. And I remember I was talking to her on the phone. She was super nervous, but she spoke up, and she went to, I think she went to a vice president or something like that, and then started her own program.
I love that. Okay, so two last questions, and you, how are we doing on time? I'm good. It's about, we're at an hour and a half. We're about 5 minutes over the half hour. We've got 62 people still in the room, so we're still going. If there are other questions, feel free to throw them in the Slido. We can keep going for a couple minutes, but you good, LT?
Oh yeah, I'm good. I got
Okay, awesome, wonderful. Yeah, she's got water, she's ready. Okay, so these are very unrelated questions. Are there any red flags that we should be aware of when researching companies to pivot to? Are there, you know, things we should look out for? Especially, this is actually a really important question because I didn't know that much about education stuff outside of education. So what do you look for? How do you know if a company is a good company?
Yeah, that's a great question. Aaron, thanks for being here, brother. So look, we have to stop romanticizing higher ed, and that higher ed is like I mean, there's some good things about higher ed for sure. There's some ways in which we can talk about identities, perhaps, that we can't in other spaces, but like white privilege exists everywhere. And so we also have to be careful about romanticizing ed tech companies as well. Most of these companies that are doing all this like mission driven work, guild, even career launch, they started by white people with MBAs, right? So we just have to be honest. Like think of these companies, very few of them are started by first gens, working class people, or people of color. So keep that in mind. So some of the things that people may be experiencing in higher ed, they may also experience in an ed tech company as well. So the main thing to do is talk to people who work there and find out what their experience is like, and listen to them. Stop like you heard it and they told you and you're gonna ignore it. Like you just have to be that's on you. Again, I had the benefit of having a connection with Sean, so I already knew kind of what I was getting into, but make sure you talk to people who work there.
Perfect. 100%. Okay, so this is the last question, and I love this question because I know you have lots of places to go with it. What are some of your favorite books or works of fiction right now, and why?
Works of fiction?
Yeah. I was actually wondering, do you read, because you do read a lot of nonfiction. So I'm interested to know, you know, with Common Book and whatnot, you are doing a lot of fiction, but have you been reading any nonfiction at the moment?
Oh yeah. I'm listening. Yes. Like young adult novels. I'm into. There's one called "She Drives Me Crazy" that I'm listening to. It's a LGBTQ rom-com. Really cute. I mean, it's got a cheerleader in it. Like, come on, like I'm sold. If it's got sports, I'm done. Up on, oh no, it's not a fiction one. There's a new book by Echo Brown that I'm interested in reading. Her story of going to Dartmouth, but that's a memoir. It's not fiction. I just finished watching Vincenzo on Netflix. I love it so much. I'm gonna watch Cheer season 2 on Netflix. Rewatching Happy Endings on Netflix. So some comedy. But you know what? I'll just tell you this. I'll tell you what I'm not reading or watching. Like, don't even send it to me. Like, I'm not watching civil rights movies. Like, don't even like, oh, LT, are you watching this? No, I'm not in that headspace right now to be like, we shall overcome and all that type of stuff. No, I gotta keep it light, sports, some mafia, then I'll probably be there.
I love it. I love it. Well, that is it for our questions that we have in general. You're getting lots of wonderful notes in the chat about thanking you for the day and enjoying everything that they're listening to and being so grateful for you. So LT, are there anything final you'd like to share with the group before we end for the day?
Yes, some homework. It was so great to see so many people at the beginning put their LinkedIn information in the chat. That's awesome. Because if you aren't on LinkedIn, I strongly recommend that you move in that direction. I remember, and it can be awkward. You're like, wait, what do I do here? It's kind of like Facebook, but it's not really. But one of the values of LinkedIn is you having access to all these other professionals. And I think that's what gets missed a lot. So I would say spend some time looking at profiles of people who you think are just cool. Like, are they doing some really cool stuff, and connect with them and send a little note. Like, when you connect, actually add the note, like, oh, I really love the work that you're doing. Like, be specific, right? That's all you need to do at first. But then the next step would be, and I know it could be nerve-wracking, but actually ask people if they have 20 minutes for a phone call. You're not asking for a job. You're just like, I really love what you do. Do you have 20 minutes to have a conversation with me? Ask them questions. How did they get there? And then ask them if there's someone else that they recommend that you talk to. Because you got to get your name out there. You want to be fresh in somebody's mind. And I know that's super nerve-wracking. And if they're busy, right? Don't take it personally. It's all good. But this is a story I hope you walk away from listening to me, is you never know where that can take you. But you got to put yourself out there. So just a little note. Don't do it to me. Don't ask me for the 20 minutes. Ask someone else you don't know, but is doing something cool. And you just don't know where that can take you. But it's so important for people to do that and stay in touch.
That was a wonderful way to end this. Thank you, LT. We so appreciate you, and you can hopefully see in the chat that everybody is shouting that out, even if we're all on mute. This was really wonderful, and please come find us on LinkedIn, and please do exactly what LT said. And I promise you, it's not personal if they don't answer. They're just busy, but keep doing it, because it doesn't mean they don't want to respond. I respond all the time, but sometimes it takes me like a month to respond because I'm busy.
Right.
So, but just keep on trying, and it's wonderful to get that. People love to get that. Who doesn't want to talk about and share some of their insights into what they're doing? So thank you, LT. What incredible insight and advice. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather, for doing this. Mel and Mike were like in the background, my brother and sister. Thank you so much for doing this. And I'm just so excited. I wish I could say something about like individual people who showed up. My son, John Ishii, is here. My brother, Kelly O'Neill, is here. I'm so sorry if I didn't say every single person. But shout out to all, like LMU. Oh my gosh. LMU, when I am wealthy and I'm going to be a millionaire, I am leaving money to LMU 100%. Shout out, and then shout out to UCLA too.
100%. Thank you. Shout out to everybody here. It was so beautiful to see so many familiar faces and new faces. And please, thank you to Mel and Mike who set this up for us. Like, it was such an ease and a breeze technically, and it was just a joy to get to be a part of it. So thanks
everybody.
y'all. Bye. Thanks everyone. Aw, so many faces.
All right. Are we back online? Hello.
You can stop